So picture this. You're a public official. You're found guilty of corruption, sentenced to prison, and you're banned from public life forever. And then, in a blink, it's all erased. Not because of some bombshell new evidence, but because of how a court defined a single word. Now, this isn't a legal thriller movie script. This is a real case from the Supreme Court of the Philippines, and it reveals this incredible tension at the very heart of what justice is.
This statement right here from Justice Garland, this is pretty much the key to the entire story. The end does not justify the means. It's this powerful reminder that the fight against corruption, as important as it is, can't just steamroll our fundamental rights. And as you're about to see, this case walks a real razor's edge between those two things.
All right, so to really understand what went down, we actually have to start at the end, with a verdict that got completely turned on its head. It's a bit of a plot twist.
I mean, that's the central mystery, right? A lower court goes through the whole process, builds a case, gets a guilty verdict, and hands down a super severe sentence. But then the highest court in the land steps in and says, nope, he's acquitted. The first question that pops into your head has to be, how? How on earth does that even happen?
To find the answer, we gotta rewind. Let's go back and look at the original charge and what this public official was actually accused of in the first place.
The man at the center of this case, People v. Palabrica, is Rufino Pablo Palabrica III, and he was charged under Republic Act 3019, which is basically the country's main playbook for going after corrupt public officials.
And listen, the Anti-Graft Court, the Sandiganbayan, they did not pull any punches. They found him guilty on 2 counts and sentenced him to up to 8 years in prison for each count. But you know the real killer was the perpetual disqualification from holding any public office. That's a career-ending, life-altering judgment. The stakes literally could not have been higher.
So what's really interesting here is how this specific law, Section 3H, actually works. It basically gives you 2 ways to be found guilty. The first is if you actively intervene in some deal where you have a financial stake. The second is if you just have a financial interest in something you're legally forbidden from having one in. In this case, Palabrica was accused under that first one, intervening.
And this right here is where the entire case just pivots. You had the prosecution with their evidence, the defense with their arguments, but the Supreme Court's review, it zeroed in on just one, seemingly simple, tiny point of contention.
This is it. This is the question that changes absolutely everything. The law is clear. A public official can't intervene in a business, a contract, or a transaction. But what exactly counts as a transaction?
It is honestly wild to think about, isn't it? A person's freedom, their entire career, a huge corruption conviction, all of it came down to a debate over the definition of a single word. It's a pretty stark reminder of why the law has to be so precise, especially when someone's liberty is on the line.
So, how did the Supreme Court settle this? Well, they used a fundamental legal tool, a principle that's like a special key for interpreting any law that carries a penalty. The principle is called strict construction, and it's really a cornerstone of a fair justice system. What it means is, if a law that can send someone to prison, what they call a penal law, is vague or unclear in any way, you can't just stretch its meaning to make a conviction stick. Any doubt, any ambiguity has to go in favor of the accused person.
Think of it like this. When you're looking at the rights of the person being accused, the law is read liberally or generously. But when you're looking at the power of the government to prosecute, that exact same law has to be read strictly or narrowly. It's a built-in check to limit the government's power.
And look, this isn't some brand new idea they just came up with. In the Palabrica case, the court pointed to this older ruling to show, hey, this has been the standard for a long, long time. The preference always goes to the interpretation that helps the person being accused.
Now, this is a super important point. The whole idea here isn't to create loopholes for guilty people to slip through. Not at all. The purpose is to force the government, the lawmakers, to be crystal clear about what is and is not a crime. If an action isn't plainly defined as illegal in the law, you can't just decide it is after the fact.
Okay, so let's get to the final act of this whole legal drama and see exactly how the court took this big principle and applied it directly to Mr. Palabrica's case. The court took that one word, transaction, and they put it right under the microscope of strict construction. They asked a very specific question. In its narrowest, most precise legal meaning, does what Palabrica did actually fit the definition of a transaction as it's written in this anti-graft law? And their answer was a clear no. The whole case was about the issuing of a business permit. And the Supreme Court basically found that, within the very specific context of this penal law,
A business permit isn't the same as a contract or some financial deal. Since the word transaction was ambiguous, they were forced to interpret it narrowly. And in that narrow reading, what Palabrica did wasn't actually the crime he was charged with.
And with that one finding, the judgment was absolute. The Sandiganbayan's decision was completely reversed and set aside. Rufino Pablo Palabrica III was acquitted on both counts. His bail bond was canceled, the order stopping him from leaving the country was lifted. The case was officially over.
And this brings us right back to where we started, with that powerful opening quote. The Supreme Court's decision wasn't a defense of corruption, not at all. It was a defense of the Constitution. It was an affirmation that even in the most well-intentioned crusade, the fundamental rights of every single person accused must be protected.
So this case really leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? It shows that the law isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's also about process and principle. It really forces us all to ask, how do we fight corruption as hard as we can, while at the same time making sure our laws are so precise that they never, ever wrongly catch an innocent person in the net? Where do you even begin to draw that line?